The slam of a door echoed through the dimly lit hallway as Nicole clutched the crumpled eviction notice in her hand. Her heart raced, disbelief and frustration surging through her veins. "You have 30 days," the landlord had barked moments earlier, his tone cold and dismissive. Nicole's breath hitched as she stepped onto the porch, the evening air doing little to calm the storm brewing inside her. She glanced back at the apartment she'd worked so hard to make her sanctuary. The injustice stung, but what her landlord didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was just how wrong he was about her. Nicole Harper wasn't the type to let life's challenges define her. At 34 years old, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that often masked the battles she had fought to reach where she was. Her dark, radiant skin and natural curls framed a face that exuded warmth, though her sharp eyes hinted at the resilience of someone who had seen her fair share of struggle. Born and raised in a small town in Georgia, Nicole learned the value of hard work from her parents. Her father, a factory worker, and her mother, a teacher, instilled in her the belief that education and perseverance could open any door. "You're going to do great things, Nicole," her mother often said, her voice filled with pride. "But you've got to work twice as hard to get half as far. Remember that." Those words stuck with Nicole, propelling her through years of challenges. She excelled academically, earning scholarships that took her to a prestigious university far from the familiarity of her hometown. While others underestimated her because of her background, Nicole let her achievements speak for themselves. She graduated at the top of her class, earning a degree in business administration that would eventually catapult her into the corporate world. But Nicole's journey wasn't without its struggles. As a black woman navigating predominantly white spaces, she often felt the weight of others' expectations, or lack thereof. Early in her career, she had been passed over for promotions, her ideas credited to others, her presence overlooked in boardrooms. Yet, she refused to let these setbacks diminish her determination. Nicole worked harder, spoke louder, and made her presence impossible to ignore. By her early 30s, she had climbed the corporate ladder to become the CEO of a thriving tech startup. Her leadership style was as innovative as it was inclusive, earning her the respect of her peers and the admiration of her team. Nicole's success, however, didn't erase the memories of where she came from. She made it a point to mentor young professionals, particularly those who, like her, faced barriers others couldn't imagine. "If I've made it this far," she often said, "I'll make sure to leave the door open for those behind me." Despite her professional success, Nicole valued the small comforts of life. Her apartment, a modest two-bedroom unit in the heart of the city, was her haven. It wasn't extravagant, but it was hers, filled with personal touches that reflected her journey. Framed photos of her family adorned the walls, a collection of books lined the shelves, and her mother's old quilt draped over the couch served as a constant reminder of home. But even as Nicole built a life she could be proud of, she wasn't immune to the challenges that came with being a black woman in America. Microaggressions, subtle biases, and outright racism were all too familiar. She had learned to navigate them with grace, though the emotional toll was undeniable. Nicole often reminded herself of her mother's words, "Keep your head high no matter what." Her landlord, Mr. Fletcher, had always been distant, managing the building with an air of indifference. Nicole had paid her rent on time every month, kept her apartment in pristine condition, and minded her own business. She wasn't the type to cause trouble, and yet there was always a sense that Mr. Fletcher regarded her differently. His curt responses to her questions, the way he avoided eye contact during their rare interactions, it all added up to a quiet but unmistakable tension. That tension reached a boiling point one afternoon when Nicole returned home to find an envelope taped to her door. The bold words, "Eviction Notice," stared back at her, their weight sinking into her chest like a stone. Her heart raced as she ripped open the envelope, her eyes scanning the letter for answers. The reason cited was vague. Violation of lease terms. Nicole frowned, her mind racing to recall any possible infraction. She hadn't violated anything. She was sure of it. The next day, she confronted Mr. Fletcher in his office, her voice calm but firm. "There must be some mistake," she said, placing the letter on his desk. "I've always paid my rent on time, and I follow the lease terms to the letter." Mr. Fletcher barely glanced at the paper, his lips curling into a tight smile. "The decision's been made," he said dismissively. "You've got 30 days to vacate." Nicole's breath hitched, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "On what grounds?" "I deserve an explanation." Mr. Fletcher leaned back in his chair, his gaze cold. "It's my property, and I have the right to make decisions about who lives here. That's all the explanation you need." The implication in his words wasn't lost on Nicole. She had seen this kind of behavior before, subtle but pointed, wrapped in just enough plausible deniability to avoid accountability. Her chest tightened, but she refused to let her frustration show. Instead, she stood tall, meeting his gaze with unwavering resolve. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," she said before turning on her heel and walking out. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, the reality of the situation sank in. Nicole had faced discrimination before, but this felt different. This was her home, her sanctuary, and someone was trying to take it from her simply because they thought they could. The thought stung, but it also ignited a fire within her. She wasn't the same girl who had quietly endured unfairness. She was Nicole Harper, and she had worked too hard to let anyone treat her as less than she was. That evening, Nicole sat in her apartment, her mind racing with plans. She wasn't just going to fight this for herself. She was going to make a statement. As she drafted an email to her lawyer, she glanced at the framed photo on her desk, her mother smiling with pride. Nicole's resolve solidified. This wasn't just about an eviction notice. This was about standing up for her rights and proving once again that she was unstoppable. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but Nicole was no stranger to adversity. She had spent her life breaking barriers, and this would be no different. With determination in her heart and a fire in her soul, she prepared to take on the challenge, knowing that this time, the stakes were personal. Nicole Harper sat at her kitchen table, the eviction notice laid flat in front of her like a challenge. The words felt heavier than the paper they were printed on, each letter a reminder of an injustice that couldn't be ignored. She sipped her coffee, the bitterness matching her mood. This wasn't just about losing an apartment. It was about being singled out, dismissed, and treated as less than she was. She thought about her encounter with Mr. Fletcher the day before. His condescending tone and dismissive attitude replayed in her mind, each word stoking the anger simmering inside her. Nicole had dealt with prejudice before, but this was different. This was her home, a space she had worked so hard to create. And now, someone was trying to take it away from her without reason. Nicole's lawyer, Samantha, was quick to respond to her email. "Nicole, this notice seems flimsy at best," Samantha had said over the phone. "We'll challenge it. He'll have to provide actual evidence of a lease violation, and from what you've told me, there isn't any." While Samantha's words gave Nicole a sense of reassurance, they didn't erase the knot of unease in her chest. Legal battles took time and energy, and Nicole had enough on her plate as it was. Leading a company wasn't for the faint of heart, and balancing her professional responsibilities with this personal fight felt like walking a tightrope. At work, Nicole tried to focus, but the situation loomed over her like a dark cloud. During meetings, her mind would drift back to the notice, to Mr. Fletcher's smug expression, to the subtle ways people had tried to undermine her throughout her life. Her assistant, Maya, noticed the change in her demeanor. "Is everything okay?" Maya asked one afternoon, her voice laced with concern. Nicole hesitated before nodding. "Just Dealing with something personal, she said, offering a small smile. She didn't want to burden anyone with her troubles, but Maya wasn't convinced. Nicole, you're always the one lifting everyone else up. Let us be there for you this time, Maya said gently. The words touched Nicole more than she let on. For someone who prided herself on independence, asking for help didn't come naturally. But Maya's sincerity made her realize she didn't have to face this alone. The days turned into a blur of meetings, phone calls, and quiet moments of reflection. Nicole found herself replaying the events that had led her here, wondering how things could have gone so wrong. She thought about the sacrifices her parents had made to give her a better life, about the nights she had spent studying until dawn, about the battles she had fought to carve out a space for herself in a world that often seemed determined to hold her back. But she also thought about the moments of triumph, the scholarships she had earned, the deals she had closed, the team she had built from the ground up. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every black woman who had ever been told she wasn't enough, for every person who had been dismissed because of someone else's ignorance. Nicole's lawyer filed an official challenge to the eviction notice, setting the wheels of justice in motion. The process was slow, each step requiring patience and perseverance. Mr. Fletcher, true to form, was uncooperative, refusing to provide any concrete evidence of a lease violation. Instead, he leaned on vague justifications, hoping Nicole would back down. But Nicole wasn't one to back down. One afternoon, as Nicole returned home from work, she noticed her neighbors whispering among themselves. She caught snippets of their conversation, words like unfair and ridiculous. When they saw her approach, they fell silent, their expressions a mix of sympathy and unease. "Is everything okay?" Nicole asked, her voice calm but firm. One of the neighbors, an older woman named Mrs. Ellis, stepped forward. "We heard about what's happening," she said, her tone apologetic. "It's not right, what he's doing to you." Nicole's chest tightened. She hadn't realized how far the news of her eviction had spread. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion swirling inside her. "I'm doing everything I can to fight it." Mrs. Ellis nodded, her gaze filled with quiet determination. "If you need anything, support, witnesses, anything, you let us know. You're not alone in this." The words were a lifeline Nicole hadn't expected. Knowing that others saw the injustice and were willing to stand with her gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just fighting for her home, she was fighting for a principle, for the idea that no one should be treated unfairly because of their background or identity. As the weeks passed, the pressure mounted. Nicole juggled late-night strategy sessions with her lawyer, long work days, and the emotional toll of the battle. There were moments when the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm her, but she found solace in small acts of resistance, drafting meticulous responses to legal documents, rallying support from her community, and reminding herself of her own worth. Her resolve was tested again when she encountered Mr. Fletcher in the hallway. He smirked as he passed her, his arrogance palpable. "You might as well start packing," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Nicole paused, her jaw tightening as she met his gaze. "You underestimate me," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "And that's your mistake." The interaction left her shaken but more determined than ever. She poured her energy into her work, finding strength in the support of her team and the belief that she was on the right side of justice. With each passing day, she grew more confident, more certain that she could weather this storm. One evening, as Nicole prepared for bed, she received an email from Samantha. The subject line read, "Hearing scheduled." Nicole's heart raced as she opened the message, her eyes scanning the details. The hearing was set for the following week, a chance to present her case, to confront the injustice head-on. Nicole took a deep breath, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The fight wasn't over, but the finish line was in sight. As she closed her laptop, she glanced at the eviction notice still taped to her fridge, a reminder of where this journey had begun and how far she had come. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test everything she had fought for. But Nicole was ready. She had faced bigger challenges before, and she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just fighting for her home. She was fighting for her dignity, her rights, and the belief that no one should ever have to endure what she had faced. Nicole Harper stood outside the courthouse, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached the imposing building. The hearing was only a few days away, but the pressure of the impending battle loomed over her. Yet, Nicole wasn't one to cower. She'd faced discrimination and adversity before, and while the stakes were personal this time, she had no intention of backing down. Inside, Nicole met with Samantha, her lawyer, who had become both a confidant and a source of reassurance throughout this ordeal. Samantha spread out papers on the desk, her movements precise. "We've got everything we need," she said confidently. "Fletcher has no case. He's banking on you giving up, but we're not letting that happen." Nicole nodded, a flicker of determination lighting her eyes. "Good. He's underestimated me for the last time." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Samantha guided Nicole through the details of the case, walking her through potential scenarios and ensuring she felt confident about her testimony. "Just tell the truth," Samantha advised. "The facts are on your side." At work, Nicole's team began to notice the strain she was under. While she remained composed in meetings and delivered sharp, insightful strategies as always, her assistant Maya could see the tension in her boss's shoulders. One afternoon, Maya approached Nicole with 2 cups of coffee. "You're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," she said, handing Nicole one of the cups. "Let us help." Nicole smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Maya. I appreciate it more than you know." The moments of support, however small, became lifelines for Nicole. Her community began to rally around her in ways she hadn't expected. Mrs. Ellis, her elderly neighbor, started a petition in the building, collecting signatures from tenants who were willing to testify to Nicole's spotless history as a resident. Even her colleagues, some of whom she rarely spoke to, reached out with messages of encouragement. But the road to justice wasn't without setbacks. 2 days before the hearing, Samantha called with news that Fletcher had hired an aggressive attorney known for exploiting loopholes. "We'll need to be sharp," Samantha warned. "They're going to try to paint you as difficult or uncooperative." Nicole's jaw tightened. "Let them try. I have nothing to hide." Still, the news added to her anxiety. The night before the hearing, Nicole sat in her apartment, the eviction notice still pinned to her fridge. She stared at it for a long moment, then pulled it down and placed it on the table. "This ends tomorrow," she murmured to herself. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. Nicole entered, her head held high, her heart pounding in her chest. She spotted Fletcher sitting at the defendant's table, his expression smug. But Nicole refused to let his arrogance shake her. The proceedings began with Samantha presenting Nicole's case. She outlined the lack of evidence in Fletcher's claims and emphasized Nicole's impeccable track record as a tenant. "My client has always paid her rent on time, maintained the property, and adhered to every term of the lease," Samantha stated firmly. "This eviction is baseless and, frankly, discriminatory." Fletcher's lawyer countered with vague assertions, attempting to paint Nicole as uncooperative. "The landlord has the right to manage his property as he sees fit," the lawyer argued, his tone condescending. Nicole took the stand, her hands steady as she swore to tell the truth. Samantha guided her through a series of questions, allowing Nicole to share her story with clarity and composure. She spoke about her commitment to her home, her interactions with Fletcher, and the toll this ordeal had taken on her. When Fletcher's lawyer cross-examined her, the questions were pointed and designed to provoke her. "Ms. Harper," he began, his voice dripping with false politeness. "Don't you think it's possible that the landlord's decision had nothing to do with you personally?" Nicole met his gaze, her voice steady. If that were true, he would have provided evidence of a lease violation. But he hasn't, because there isn't any. Her calm, measured response left little room for doubt. As the hearing continued, Samantha presented witness statements from neighbors and copies of Nicole's payment records. Each piece of evidence chipped away at Fletcher's defense, leaving his lawyer scrambling to recover. When it was Fletcher's turn to testify, his mask of smugness began to slip. Under Samantha's cross-examination, he faltered, his vague answers revealing the weakness of his case. At one point, Samantha asked, "Can you provide a single documented instance of Ms. Harper violating her lease?" Fletcher hesitated, then muttered, "Not exactly." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Not exactly isn't sufficient, Mr. Fletcher." The tide of the hearing shifted decisively in Nicole's favor. By the time the closing arguments were made, the tension in the room was palpable. Samantha delivered a powerful statement, urging the court to see the eviction for what it was, an unjust and baseless attempt to target Nicole. As the judge adjourned the session to deliberate, Nicole felt a surge of hope. She had done everything she could. Now all she could do was wait. That evening, Nicole returned to her apartment, exhausted but proud of the stand she had taken. She glanced at her phone, which buzzed with messages of support from her friends and colleagues. Maya had even sent a photo of the office team holding a sign that read, "We've got your back, Nicole." The next morning, the court's decision arrived. Samantha called, her voice brimming with excitement. "We won, Nicole. The eviction has been overturned." Nicole's breath caught in her throat, relief washing over her like a wave. "Thank you, Samantha," she said, her voice trembling. "I couldn't have done this without you." But Samantha shook her head. "You did this, Nicole. Your strength and determination made this happen." As Nicole hung up, she sat quietly for a moment, letting the victory sink in. She had fought for her home, for her dignity, and for the principle that no one should be treated unfairly. And she had won. The rising action of Nicole's journey had reached its peak, setting the stage for a resolution that would not only secure her home, but also inspire her to continue fighting for justice in all its forms. The courtroom was silent as the judge re-entered, the sound of her footsteps echoing off the polished floor. Nicole Harper sat at her table, her hands clasped tightly together. Beside her, Samantha offered a reassuring nod, but Nicole's heart still pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment that would determine not only her home, but also her dignity. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked at the documents before her. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimony, this court finds that the eviction notice served to Ms. Nicole Harper was issued without sufficient grounds, she said, her voice steady and authoritative. Nicole barely heard the rest. Relief flooded her as the weight she had been carrying for weeks lifted all at once. She exhaled deeply, her chest rising and falling as she processed the words. She had won. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, Fletcher shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His once smug expression was now replaced by a mix of disbelief and frustration. He tried to catch the judge's attention, but she continued speaking, her tone firm. "The plaintiff is ordered to rescind the eviction notice immediately and cover the defendant's legal fees. Furthermore, any further actions against Ms. Harper must adhere strictly to the terms of her lease." Samantha placed a hand on Nicole's arm, her smile wide. "You did it," she whispered. Nicole turned to her, her eyes glassy with tears. "We did it," she corrected, her voice trembling. As the judge adjourned the court, Fletcher and his lawyer quickly gathered their things, avoiding eye contact with Nicole. It was a stark contrast to their earlier arrogance, and the sight of it filled her with a quiet sense of justice. Outside the courtroom, Nicole was greeted by a small group of supporters, her neighbors, her team members, even Mrs. Ellis, who had insisted on attending the hearing despite her age. "You showed them, Nicole," Mrs. Ellis said, her voice full of pride. "You stood up for all of us." Nicole hugged her, the gratitude in her heart too overwhelming for words. She looked around at the faces of those who had supported her, realizing that this victory wasn't just hers. It was a win for anyone who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or mistreated. The immediate aftermath of the case was a whirlwind. News of Nicole's victory spread quickly, sparking conversations about housing discrimination and tenant rights. Samantha, ever the advocate, encouraged Nicole to share her story publicly. "Your voice can inspire others to stand up for themselves," she said. At first, Nicole hesitated. She wasn't one to seek attention, but the thought of helping others in similar situations resonated deeply with her. She agreed, giving a heartfelt interview to a local news station. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about standing up for what's right, even when the odds feel stacked against you." The interview gained traction, and soon Nicole found herself at the center of a larger conversation. Activists and community leaders reached out, inviting her to speak at events and join initiatives aimed at addressing systemic housing discrimination. Though it was a new and unfamiliar role, Nicole embraced it with the same determination that had carried her through the courtroom battle. Her life at the apartment returned to a semblance of normalcy, but it wasn't quite the same. Neighbors who had once been distant now greeted her warmly, offering smiles and kind words in passing. The tension that Fletcher had sown in the building began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of unity among the tenants. One evening, as Nicole returned from work, she found Elliot, Mrs. Ellis's grandson, waiting by her door. He held a bouquet of flowers in his small hands, his cheeks flushed with shyness. "Grandma said to give you these," he said, holding out the bouquet. Nicole knelt to his level, a wide smile spreading across her face. "Thank you, Elliot. That's very sweet of you." "They're to say thank you for being so brave," he added, his voice barely above a whisper. Nicole's heart swelled as she hugged the boy. It was moments like these that reminded her why she had fought so hard. It wasn't just about her. It was about showing others that they too could stand up for themselves. As the weeks turned into months, Nicole's life continued to evolve. She threw herself into her work with renewed energy, her success serving as a testament to her resilience. Her company thrived under her leadership, and her team drew inspiration from her strength. But Nicole didn't stop there. She began working with local organizations to provide resources and support for tenants facing similar battles. She helped establish workshops on tenant rights, ensuring that others would have the tools and knowledge to defend themselves. One of the most emotional moments came when a young woman approached Nicole at a community event. "You don't know me," the woman said, her voice trembling, "but your story gave me the courage to fight my own eviction case, and I won. Thank you for showing me that it's possible." Nicole hugged her, tears welling in her eyes. "You're stronger than you know," she said, "and I'm so proud of you." The long-term consequences of Nicole's victory extended far beyond her apartment building. Her case became a symbol of what could happen when people refused to be silenced. It wasn't just about fighting an unfair landlord. It was about challenging a system that had been built to exclude and marginalize. For Nicole, the battle had been deeply personal, but its impact was far-reaching. She had learned that standing up for herself wasn't just about reclaiming her rights. It was about paving the way for others to do the same. Late one evening, as Nicole sat on her couch with a cup of tea, she reflected on everything that had happened. The eviction notice that had once filled her with dread was now a distant memory, replaced by the knowledge that she had faced down an injustice and emerged stronger. She glanced at a framed photo on her wall, a picture of her parents smiling proudly. "I did it," she whispered, her voice steady and filled with quiet triumph. "And I'll keep doing it." Nicole Harper's journey was far from over, but she knew one thing for certain. She was ready for whatever came next. Nicole Harper sat in her favorite chair by the window, the late afternoon sunlight streaming in and casting a warm glow across her apartment. It felt surreal to be sitting here in this space she had fought so hard to keep. The eviction notice was long gone, replaced by a renewed sense of peace and purpose. But the journey to this moment was one she knew she would never forget. The weeks following the court's decision had been transformative. Nicole's victory wasn't just a personal win, it had become a symbol of resilience and justice in her community. She had shown that standing up for oneself could ripple out, inspiring others to find their voice and demand fairness. At work, Nicole's determination and strength seemed to take on a new dimension. Her team looked at her not just as their CEO, but as someone who truly embodied the values she preached: integrity, courage, and perseverance. During a staff meeting, her assistant Maya spoke up, her voice filled with admiration. "You didn't just fight for yourself, Nicole. You showed all of us that it's okay to demand what we deserve." Nicole smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "We all have moments when we're tested," she replied. "What matters is how we respond, and we never have to face those moments alone." The sense of community that had grown from her experience extended beyond her office. Neighbors who had once been strangers now greeted her warmly in the halls. Mrs. Ellis often stopped by with baked goods or a kind word, and Elliot, her grandson, had become a frequent visitor, his curiosity about the world and its workings a constant source of joy for Nicole. But it wasn't just her immediate circle that felt the impact. Nicole's story had gained attention far beyond her apartment building. Community leaders and activists reached out, inviting her to share her experiences and lend her voice to initiatives aimed at addressing housing discrimination. Though the prospect of public speaking had once intimidated her, Nicole embraced the opportunity, knowing that her story could help others. At one such event, she stood before a crowd of tenants, advocates, and policymakers, her voice steady as she recounted her journey. "This isn't just about one eviction notice," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "It's about the systems that make it so easy for people to be dismissed, silenced, and overlooked. We all deserve dignity no matter where we come from or what we look like, and it's up to us to fight for that, for ourselves and for each other." The applause that followed was thunderous, but what touched Nicole most were the individual conversations afterward. People approached her with stories of their own struggles, thanking her for giving them hope. One young woman, barely out of college, held Nicole's hands tightly as she spoke. "I was about to give up," she said, tears brimming in her eyes, "but your story reminded me that I'm worth fighting for." Moments like those fueled Nicole's resolve. She began collaborating with local organizations, helping to establish workshops on tenant rights and creating a mentorship program for women facing workplace discrimination. Through it all, she remained grounded, never losing sight of the lessons she had learned along the way. Her connection with Samantha, her lawyer, grew as well. The two began working together on pro bono cases, providing legal support to those who couldn't afford representation. Samantha often joked, "You've become my unofficial partner in crime, Nicole." Nicole would laugh but always replied seriously, "You gave me a lifeline when I needed it most. I want to do the same for others." In her personal life, Nicole found a deeper sense of fulfillment. The apartment, once just a place to rest her head, now felt like a sanctuary. Each piece of furniture, each framed photo carried new meaning. She had fought for this space, and now it was a testament to her strength and resilience. One evening, as Nicole prepared dinner, her parents called. Her father's deep, familiar voice filled the room. "We saw your interview on the news," he said, pride evident in every word. "Your mother and I couldn't be prouder." Nicole's mother chimed in, her tone warm. You've always been strong, but seeing you stand up like this, it's inspiring, baby." Nicole's eyes filled with tears as she leaned against the counter. "I wouldn't be here without you two. Everything I've done is because of what you taught me." Their conversation was a reminder of how far she had come and the people who had shaped her along the way. After the call ended, Nicole sat in quiet reflection, thinking about her journey, the battles she had fought, the people who had supported her, and the lessons she had learned. The next day, Nicole received a letter in the mail. It was from a tenant she had met at one of the workshops. The letter was handwritten, the words carefully chosen. "Your strength gave me courage," it read. "Because of you, I stood up to my landlord. I didn't know I had it in me, but you showed me what was possible." Nicole read the letter twice, her heart swelling with emotion. She folded it carefully and placed it in a small box on her desk, a box filled with notes, messages, and mementos from those who had been touched by her story. It was a tangible reminder of the difference she had made, a source of inspiration for the days when the weight of the world felt heavy. As time passed, Nicole continued to grow, both personally and professionally. She expanded her company, creating initiatives to support diversity and inclusion within the industry. She also made time for herself, rediscovering old hobbies and nurturing relationships that brought her joy. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the city lights, she felt a deep sense of peace. The battles she had fought hadn't been easy, but they had been worth it. She had reclaimed her home, her voice, and her sense of purpose, and in doing so, she had shown others that they, too, could rise above adversity. Nicole picked up her journal, a habit she had recently started, and wrote a single sentence. "Strength isn't about never falling. It's about always getting back up." As she closed the journal, she smiled, knowing that her story was far from over. The challenges would come again, as they always did. But Nicole Harper was ready. She had faced the storm and emerged stronger, and now she was determined to help others do the same. Nicole Harper's journey is a powerful reminder that standing up for yourself isn't just an act of courage, it's a catalyst for change. Her fight against injustice wasn't just about keeping her home. It was about reclaiming her dignity and inspiring others to do the same. But her story doesn't have to end here. It's a call to action for all of us. Think about the moments in your life when you felt overlooked, dismissed, or treated unfairly. How did you respond? Did you stay silent, or did you take a stand? Nicole's story challenges us to reflect on those moments and ask ourselves, what can we do to ensure no one feels powerless in the face of injustice? Start with your community. Look around and ask yourself if everyone has an equal opportunity to thrive. Are there people who might be struggling silently, unsure of how to find their voice? Be the person who listens, supports, and uplifts. A small act of kindness or advocacy can make a world of difference for someone in need. Educate yourself and others. Learn about housing rights, workplace discrimination, or any issue that hits close to home. Knowledge is power, and when you're equipped with the facts, you can make informed decisions and help others navigate their challenges. Share what you learn with friends, family, or colleagues. Awareness sparks change. If Nicole's story resonated with you, share it. Share it with someone who might need the courage to stand up for themselves. Share it with someone who could use a reminder that resilience and hope can overcome even the toughest battles. And most importantly, use it as motivation to take action in your own life. Advocacy doesn't require a big platform or resources. It starts with one person choosing to act. Whether it's joining a community initiative, mentoring someone who feels lost, or simply offering support to a friend, every effort counts. Together, we can create a world where fairness, respect, and dignity are more than ideals. They're realities. Nicole didn't know the ripple effect her actions would have when she chose to fight back. But her determination sparked a movement, proving that one voice can inspire many. Let her story remind you of your own strength. You have the power to make a difference, not just for yourself, but for those around you. The next step is yours. Will you stand up? Will you speak out? Will you use your voice to create change? The choice is in your hands, and the impact you make could be greater than you ever imagined. Let's start today.